Hey, by the way, before we get started, I just want to let you know that the GovCon Chamber, we dropped a new issue of the newsletter. So you can find that on our company page. You'll see that in a second. But if you haven't seen it yet, go take a look at it. We've got some agency information about the VA. We've got a couple of tips on one on business development, one on capture. So there's a lot of good stuff in there if you haven't looked at it. One other thing that I did over the weekend is I went back and grabbed a whole bunch of LinkedIn content that I put out throughout the last couple of weeks, and I just summarized it into a bunch of bullets. And so if you haven't seen that, go look on Saturday in my activity, and you'll see that. And some of them might be more valuable than others to you. An example is I posted something about HHS, and I also posted something about Department of Justice with IT strategic plan. Maybe Justice and not HHS is your target agency. Well, you find some stuff that's relevant in there. Looks like we got all goods. Everybody's giving me a yes. I am going to get started. I'm Neil McDonnell, president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to my daily LinkedIn Live, where I discuss process and procedures to achieve success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching folks just like you that government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. That process is A to Z. And when we pay attention to the steps in between, we'll achieve the success at the end that we hope for. Today, I'm going to be talking about the difference between agencies and teammate stakeholders when establishing new relationships. I'm going to cover three things. One is I'm going to define the difference as I see it between these stakeholders, or these stakeholder groups, actually, the larger level. I'm going to explain risks that each of these groups want to manage when talking with you. And so it's something to be paying attention to. And then I'm going to wrap up with a few tips on how to impress large primes. So if that's something that's interesting to you. Right now, I want to ask you a favor before we get started, is I want you to add your company LinkedIn page into the comments, chat, etc., so that we can all find you and perhaps even follow your company here on LinkedIn. I keep talking about tell me what your core competency is. And if I find your company page, I might go over there and just follow it so I can pay attention to whatever you put out. And when it makes sense, I can comment or share. And so go ahead and the way you do it is just put an @ symbol and start typing your company name. It should come up. If you're not familiar with that, go ahead and put in the chat any questions you have about how to do it. And somebody on there, Gus, hopefully, and some others will look at it. I'm going to rearrange my screen a little bit just so you know, in case this is your first time. I generally don't look at comments or chats as I'm delivering the training, just so I can get through the mix of it. But there's great community in there. People are really friendly. Gus is on there as one of my colleagues. Cecilia might be on here. And so they'll take care of you, and I'll look for questions at the end. But I like to drive straight into the topic. And today's topic, the difference between selling to federal agencies and large primes. There are a different group of stakeholders here, right? And this is a right set of training for you. If you feel like some of the meetings that you're going after, they're not improving the relationships, or they're not moving those relationships forward as you'd expect them to do so. I like to say, and so many people do like to say, that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. We want to know that you care about us. And that's really important. And that's going to go into the gist of what I'm talking about today, and really the solution to why maybe those meetings aren't moving forward. By speaking the language of your stakeholders, and these are the people you're meeting with when I say stakeholders here. By speaking the language of those stakeholders, you'll be focusing on their WIFM. What's in it for me, right? If you've heard that term, what's in it for me? If I sit down with you, I might be thinking, what's in it for me, right? And all of us should be paying attention to what the other person's WIFM is, right? If I'm sitting down with a large prime or an agency or even a small teammate, I want to think in my mind, what's in it for them? What are they hoping to see? Or if I paraphrase Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? Maybe I'm not paraphrasing so much as flat out quoting him, but Stephen Covey has that habit that says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that's one of the foundational principles you should have when you're building a relationship, and it'll lead you to success. So if that sounds familiar to you, right, that your relationships or your meetings aren't moving your relationships forward as you'd expect, then let's talk about, maybe what we can do to improve that, beginning with understanding the three stakeholder groups. I know in the title I said agency and large primes, but the reality is there's three stakeholder groups. There's the small business teaming partners, there's large business teaming partners, and then there's federal agencies, right? And so those three groups of people are ones you typically would be reaching out to have meetings and you want to build relationships with, et cetera. And I just want to break down those three groups of stakeholders into who you might be interacting with. And as you move forward, you'll see I'll describe when you know which stakeholder group you're going after, you'll be better prepared to have the right language, the right questions, whether to talk about your company first in this way or talk about your company in this other way. So I'll talk about that. But when you think about small business teaming partners, there's two main people you would typically meet. And I always say typical, right? I'm not trying to do all the exceptions. I'm not trying to hit every single possible one. But the typical people you would meet within a small business teaming partner is either the owner of the company, which many of you actually might be, but so the owner of the company, or somebody who's in this role of a business developer / capture leads. Generally in small businesses under $10 million, the business developer and the capture person is the same person. Your job is to go get into an agency, find an opportunity, bring it back, clean it, prepare it for dinner, and let's eat, right? Kind of thing. Some of you might actually even go into proposal writing at that level. But the main people you're meeting with are folks who are responsible for the sales, business developers and capture leads, and the owners of the company. So at a small business, that's who you interact with. Now compare that with large businesses and who you might interact with. At large businesses, you typically find that there is a different person in the role of a business developer and then the capture lead, right? So the business developer, I often think of the business developer being those people who retired out of the Navy, and then they go back and they're just knocking on doors, finding opportunities, et cetera. And so you have the business developer you might be reaching out to and trying to build a relationship with. You'll have a capture person. The business developer tends to be more focused on the agency, where the capture lead is focused more on an opportunity, maybe at that agency, right? But a single opportunity focused kind of a conversation. Same thing with the next role is the proposal manager. So at a large business, you're dealing with a business developer, a capture lead, or a proposal manager. And there's one more that I want to add in there for you to just be paying attention to on stakeholders within this stakeholder group. And this is the contract vehicle program manager. Often large companies, or really any company, but especially large companies, dedicate a person to manage the contract vehicles. Sometimes those contract vehicles have so much activity on them that they have one person dedicated to that contract vehicle. And so that's another stakeholder within that stakeholder group that you might be reaching out to and understanding their language, what they're trying to achieve. What they do is different perhaps than what the business developer does. And so understanding those roles within a stakeholder group will help you be able to have the conversations better. I'm always tracking my time on my phone, so you see me look down here. The last group of stakeholders are the federal agency customer, right? And there's two primary groups of people within federal agencies. You have the acquisition-related people, contracting officers as an example, right? They're the most glaring example of that stakeholder group for the acquisition side. And when I say acquisition, I mean any decision or requirement related to how we're buying, not what we're buying. And so what we're buying is the next group, which is touching on the scope of the requirements of an opportunity. And that those people are the program managers. It might be a program manager, somebody in a program office, et cetera. But those two different types of people have two different, you have two different goals when you're trying to contact them. When you contact the contracting officer, it typically is about shaping the acquisition decisions or understanding acquisition-related decisions they made. When you contact the program office, you're trying to dive deeper into their needs, their challenges, their goals. And so understanding those two in there. So first thing we talked about here are the three stakeholder groups: small business teaming partners, large business teaming partners, and federal agency teaming partners. The one thing I want you to do for me before I move on to how to communicate with them is in the chat, help me with a little survey here really quick. Just put small, large, or agency and choose one. Which one would you want to have more success with over the next month? Don't choose two, please. Don't choose three. Just if you picked one of these three, which one would you want to have more success? When I move on and I start telling you about tips for succeeding in there, which one would you like to move forward with? So put small, large, or agency. And it gives me a chance to drink some water. Thanks, Paul. I see agency. Roger, it's large. Agency. Danny, Danny, I saw you earlier on LinkedIn with me. Yeah, that's funny. A lot of agency, a lot of smalls. Good. So small, large, or agency. Put it in the chat. I'm going to move on to my next slide here. I'm just using some notes. This next part I want to talk to you about is risks and objections that are in the stakeholders' minds. When I'm knocking on the door of somebody new and I'm going to be meeting with them, they have risks that they're concerned with when meeting with me in a business sales type world, right? They have some concerns that are in their mind, and I want to be aware of those. You might also think about them as objections. I've been selling for 30 years. I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. And when I go in there, people had all sorts of objections, including something like price. Well, if I know price is the objection somebody might have when I'm selling a vacuum cleaner inside, then I know the only solution to a price objection or concern that it's too high, right, is to increase the value. When the value becomes so high that they don't think about price, I have a sale. And until that's done, I haven't done my job. And anytime somebody gives me an objection that I know already they have, anytime they voice that objection, price, I know I didn't do a good job 10xing the value to the price. And it's the same thing with a federal buyer or with a large or small teammate, is that when you go in, they have certain objections in their mind about why they wouldn't work with you, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just, flight or fight type thing. When we look at something, we instantly as humans are trying to make decisions. And when they look at a new person they're building a relationship with like you, then they're going to have some of these concerns. And what we have to do is recognize that they think this way, that I think this way when I meet with you, right? We have to recognize this and be able to address it. And I'll give you one quick story about me before I move into my tips here. Is that I put out tons of content about how you can succeed in the federal government contracting space. And I will talk to anybody. But one of the things that's in my mind whenever I talk to somebody is, have you paid attention to what I say is the most important thing a small business must do in order to succeed? You say you want to succeed, do this one thing, and that is the foundation stone to everything else. Can anybody guess what I say? It's DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search. It's your small business profile that says what you do. And I say, based on data, that over 70% of small businesses are virtually invisible. If you're a small business and you're coming to talk to me, one of my questions is going to be, did you update your DSBS profile? Hey, Neil, I can't get in here. I'm not having success here. I'm going to come back here and look at this. Now, I don't use this and get mad at you or be snooty or something. What I do is I go, hey, let's look at your thing, John, and make sure your profile is good to go. But one way you could overcome my objection of you not looking at my content or something to find the one suggestion I say all the time is for you to go, hey, I've watched your videos and I know DSBS is the right thing. So before I called you, I did this. I'm going to go, oh my God, I'm going to do whatever I can to help this person move forward, because they took what I say is the most important tip I could give you, and they did it. And that's what we want to see when we're reaching out to these stakeholder groups. So let me talk about small business teaming partners. One of the chief concerns small businesses have generally is that I'm afraid you're going to steal my client, right? Of all the different concerns, that's the one I've heard over the last 10, 20 years. And I know why it exists. It's because we don't know enough yet, some of us, that small businesses and really anybody in government contracting are competimates, not competitors. Competimates means some days I'm a subcontract on your opportunity. Some days you're a subcontractor on my opportunity. Some days we are complete competition. We don't work together on an opportunity. That's a competitor. It means sometimes we work together, sometimes we don't. No problem. The pie is big enough for all of us to succeed and achieve our goals. But as we're transitioning from a kind of a newer, immature small business to more mature, recognizing the value of teammates, as we're doing that transition, there's this concern about, well, will you get in? Will I get you into the VA and then you'll just take my customers and they'll kick me out? And there's so much packaging that goes into that, into the insecurity we might feel when we say that. But the reality is, if you go in knowing that that's a concern, then maybe you can directly address it with some of the things you say right off the gate, or even in your email or voicemail to reach out. They want to trust you. So one of the ways that I've addressed this in the past is said, hey, I'm looking for somebody I could team up with for the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, subcontract, learn under you, not trying to prime it all in there. And it begins to minimize that concern that they have that I'm going to steal their client, right? It's just because I don't believe that that's a real concern doesn't make it not a real concern, if that makes sense. If it's real to them, it's real to me. And how am I going to address it? When I address that concern, now their mind is open to have the dialogue that I want, which is how can we succeed together? So let's move into large primes, same kind of thing, right? Large business teaming partners, they have a pretty clear set of concerns that they have when they talk with the small business. So when you're approaching a large business, some of these things that I'm about to mention is what they have concerns about. And one thing I want to point out, by the way, is these concerns, I can observe stuff in my own experience. I can tell you exactly what the reality is. But these concerns are concerns I get from large businesses that I pull in and I do events, panel interviews, et cetera. And I say to them, what do you want us to do as smalls? What's your biggest concern with us, et cetera? And so these tips are coming from that. And really for large business, their biggest concern with us, their biggest objection with working with you as a small business, as an example, is maturity of your organization. It's their maturity focus. How mature is your organization? There's 3 kind of key risks that they're worried about. One is financial, right? So they want you to be financially strong as a company. And in particular, you can think of it this way. They look in and say, do you have a line of credit with your bank that you can keep paying your employees payroll, right? You can keep paying that if the large doesn't pay you for 90 or 120 days, because maybe the government's not paying them and they don't pay you until they get paid, right? They're worried about, can you last 90 or even 180 days if you're not getting money from them? Now, there's a Small Business Act that has a lot of good regulations that protect you from having to deal with that. But that's a concern of theirs, because if you can't pay your employees and you're on one of their contracts, then maybe your employees quit, right? And so they have that concern. Another one is technically proficient. Are you able to do what you just said you could do, right? We wrote a proposal together. We went after an opportunity together, or we're going to. You want me to work with you as a small business. Are you the best of the best, right? Greg might be on the call today. He's SharePoint and Office 365 out in San Diego, right? Solidly in my head. That's why I asked for core competencies. Greg can come in and demonstrate time over and over that his company has got expertise, so much so that the large prime might look at him and go, geez, you got more experience than we got, right? And so it's important that that you have that competency that's in there. The next one is your ability to recruit and retain people. One of the concerns that large businesses have when they get into businesses with smalls is that you come in, we win a contract together, I'm going to give you 10%, 20% of the contract, and then you turn around and ask if I can help you hire people, find and hire people, et cetera. And the reality is that's your job as a teammate, right? We brought you on as a teammate because you were able to bring in the people who already had the experience with you, or you had a recruiting plan, a strategy in place and tools in place to be able to hire the right people. So for a large, they want to be able to rely on you. When you say you're going to do stuff related to the contract, be able to participate in proposal, et cetera, they want to know that. And so they're focusing on that. I want to look at this one question. So the interesting thing, somebody's there saying, as a large business, we're not concerned. I would submit, as a large business, you're not concerned. But I can point you right to videos of some of the largest top 10, 20 companies that they talk about maturity. They just flat out say it, that our criteria is you will not come in without the maturity level. there is that other thing where I talk about technically proficient. I'm trying to lean towards that, that part that you have, which is perfect, the technical approach. Can you contribute to the technical approach? Really fits into that technical proficient part. Okay, so the last risk and objection group is the federal agencies. In here, their project management focus is how I describe it, right? And so for these folks, it really becomes those three legs of a project management stool: on time, on budget, in scope. And so from the government's perspective, they got a mission to accomplish. They want to know that you're the subject matter expert and you will come in and get done what they need to get done. They're not here to babysit you as a contractor. And so when they're looking at you initially, right, they're looking for that experience, subject matter expertise, and past performance goes with that. So when you're talking with an agency, this is why I always say go subcontract with smalls, get 2 or 3 or 4 years of experience subcontracting, so that when you turn to the agency, you're coming with past performance. Might not be prime contracting, but they can look and say, well, at least according to the mission, you can accomplish that and you can address it, because their mission depends on that prime contractor. The government works with the prime, not with the subs to a degree, right? They look to that prime to deliver. And so if you're reaching out to talk to a federal agency stakeholder, then what they want to feel coming in is that you really are an expert in your field. Your company is an expert in your field. You can be their trusted advisor. They can look to you, shape the requirements, discuss the requirements, manage the risks that are out there that maybe they can't see. All that comes from your expertise. But they also want to know that you're not going to come back and say, hey, I need twice as much, right? And so those are kind of the things you want to pay attention to from a risk management or objection handling, is how are they thinking, right? And so I want to pause 1 second, just look at my time. So I'm down to 22 minutes and going with this whole path here. The last one I want to give you is 3 tips to impress large primes. And feel free to put in the comments any other tips that you have on impressing large primes, right? I wanted to give you 3 that work well when you're talking to a large prime, you're having your first meeting, et cetera. And the first thing is what I just went to. You want to talk to their concerns. Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so when you're doing that, if you understand, like I'm suggesting, that some of their main concerns are maturity. Are you able to be a good teammate in here? Whatever the reason, are you able to participate in there? If you understand that, then you can pull up those concerns. I watched somebody had a briefing deck, and this is where I got this idea of actually today's whole topic. Somebody had a briefing deck where the maturity, all the different things they had in place, ISO certification, CMMI, their back office tools to manage payroll, their line of credits, all these kind of things were buried. And I think buried is great when you're working with an agency because they want to talk more about scope there. But when you're working with a large, I'm like, bring that right to the front, right in the beginning, because if you can get them in their head to think, this is not a small newbie business like the ones I get knocking on my door all the time, but this is a procurement ready, mature organization, organizational mature, strong, right? There's a difference between a brand new firm or firms that's been doing a couple of years and maybe yours that's 5 or 10 years in or 5 or 10 million in with that amount of experience. Bringing that to the first page or 2 of your deck puts it in their head that these guys are squared away. Okay, now let's move in and talk about technical approach, how you're going to participate in our pursuit of the agency or our pursuit of this individual opportunity. So talk to their concerns in there. One thing going with something somebody had said is, as you start having conversations with each of these large primes, they're not all the same, right? Just because you met one doesn't mean you know all. And so as soon as you get in, you begin to have that conversation, begin to develop your own understanding of what does this organization care about more than others. Because there are, like the person suggested in the comments about technical approach, there are some firms that that's what they look to first. And there's others that won't even have a conversation unless you're financially strong, right? There's these different concerns they have. Well, that's part of your questioning as you're building a relationship. So tip number 1, talk to their concerns. Tip number 2 is to focus on your core competency and how that's going to be synergistic to what they do, right? People talk about value proposition, et cetera, but if you're an expert at SharePoint, or you're an expert at data analytics, et cetera, or you're an expert at painting or framing, where do you fit into that large prime? How will you be able to contribute to their activity. A lot of us in the IT business, we're like, the largest can pretty much do we'll say they do everything all of us smalls do, which is fine. So where do you fit into that? Are you sitting there and making yourself more of an expert? When I had my last company, we sent everybody to get SharePoint certified, a developer, an engineer, et cetera. But we constantly were trying to get them certified so that we could say we had more SharePoint certified people tied with Microsoft than, let's say, like Booz Allen. Booz Allen can do SharePoint, but they value that we brought in such a tight focus on SharePoint or some of the Office 365, so that as they went after much larger projects, they saw us being able to fit in there and contribute to the activity. Okay, and the last one, it goes with what I just said, is be clear about how you're going to help them win. And I think this goes to that suggestion somebody said earlier about writing to the technical approach. Writing to the technical approach, to me, is about contributing to the proposal. Many larges want to know that you will come in and be able to write. I know of larges that say, hey, just get on the team, we're obligated, blah, blah, blah. We don't need you to do anything. But most people, small or large, will want you to contribute to the proposal. Be very clear about how you can help. If you're going to come in and get on an opportunity, look at the task areas and go, you know what, we can really write to this. Should we get started? Are you looking for us to do a couple of pages, et cetera? Be very proactive and clear about how you can help them win an opportunity. And that'll impress a large prime, because many large primes just have to deal with a lot of smalls who unfortunately are a little less organized, less prepared to help them, and a little bit more hands out, what can I get? And so when you go in, and if you've got to focus on how can I help you get what you want first, that will impress people. And they'll, and then you'll be able to have the full turnaround where you're able to get your goals accomplished as well. So anyways, very fast moving through this today. And just as a reminder, right, today we talked about the difference between the stakeholders and what they might want to hear first. This is about, by the way, this whole thing today is about that first phone call. How do I get in and have that meeting that leads to more success in the relationship, moves the relationship forward? So that's the idea of this, right? This is not long-term thinking. It's just immediate. How do I get success in that first meeting, or how do I get that first meeting to turn into a relationship that will have more than one meeting? And so that's what I was driving at with today's topic. If you got value today, please give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. One last thing I'll mention as a kind of a call to action for you is join me in tomorrow's training, and you can learn about how to write emails to federal buyers that get you meetings, right? I want to give you some tips on ways to write emails and maybe some things not to do. That'll help you get meetings if you feel like you're reaching out, but you're not getting meetings. I'm going to see if I got time. So we're down to the wire. I'm not going to look at too much of the comments. I'm going to come back. I'll look at those. If you've been here before, I go back and respond to every comment. But for now, remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next event.